You don't want your peak wattage on the day to be in a warm-up.
I can't tell you how many times I've done that. Hit peak wattage for the day in your warm-up and then never be able to repeat it again. What's up, crew? Welcome to another episode of Coaches on Couches.
Being slouches.
We're going to talk about crit racing today.
Very timely topic.
Yeah, this is how we get our topics. We're like, what's going on this weekend?
Yes. Turns out.
Or we go, hey, what do you want to talk about tomorrow?
Yeah. So if you guys have topics, holler at us.
Yeah.
We could plan this in advance a little bit more.
We had the state crit here. Tennessee State Crit is in Memphis this weekend. It's on our home turf, our home crit course at Tiger Lane. Awesome course. And so we decided to talk a little bit about crit racing because it's kind of it's not what you necessarily see as far as bike racing goes. It's a little bit different discipline.
Yeah, it's so much different, especially for a newbie. Like, it's so much different than going on a group ride. Right. A group ride probably going to be a little more similar to what a road race would be like.
Yeah.
Crit racing, totally different.
Very different.
Different style of racing.
It's like the NASCAR of cycling.
It is. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's probably my favorite.
But there is a little bit of a like nervous barrier of entry, so to speak, when it comes to it, because it is just such a different style of racing. So
yeah, our hope is that you watch this and then you sign up for the crit and we see you out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Or sign up for one in your area, wherever you're at.
Yeah, definitely kind of, dip your feet in the water as far as crit racing goes, because it is tons of fun.
Yep. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
All right. So I'm Coach Dale Sanford.
I'm Coach Bryant Funston. We are the co-founders of BPC Performance Coaching, where we specialize in helping time-crunched athletes optimize their busy schedules so they can maximize their athletic performance. You can find out more about us by going to buildpeakcompete.com, checking Facebook and YouTube at Build Compete, or all up on that Instagram at BPC Performance.
Perfect. All right, so I guess the best place to start, Funston, would be, what the heck is a crit?
Yeah, I just had it pulled up on the, I got it here. On the USA Cycling website, in the rule book. A criterium is a closed loop course entirely closed to traffic. So that's going to be different than a lot of your road races. Yep. The length of the course is between 800 meters and 5 kilometers. I've never done an 800 meter. Yeah.
I didn't know.
I always thought it was like a mile and a half. If it was greater than a mile and a half, I thought it was then considered a circuit
maybe they changed it. 5K is a long loop to do a crit on.
Mm-hmm. The minimum width throughout the course should be 7 meters.
That's pretty narrow.
Yeah, 21 feet there, a little more.
Yeah.
But essentially what you're looking at a shorter looped course. It's a mass start event, so everyone starts together within your category, or if you're a newbie, you'd be signing up for like the Cat 5 or novice category they now have with USA Cycling. And one of the major differences is you're going to end up seeing on the flyer on the race registration, it's going to be time-based as opposed to we're doing 8 loops, we're doing 10 loops, we're doing this distance. So then what happens is during the race, the officials are timing the laps, and say you're at a 45-minute race is what your race is. They'll start getting lap average times and then make a decision on how many laps are going to be left in the race. So you don't really know how far you're going to go necessarily, but you are going to end up being pretty close to the time that your race was listed at.
Yeah, and so once they get like the average lap times, they will start getting like, okay, about how many laps will we cover in the race time, the race allotted time. And then they'll, like, once they figure that out, they'll start counting down laps. And so you'll start seeing lap cards of like 8 to go, 7 to go. And then obviously on the bell lap, that 1 to go, whoever crosses the finish line first, that's your winner.
Yep. Assuming they've not been lapped.
Assuming, yeah.
Which we can talk about some of those finer details if we want to. But
so, you talked about time in the races. So, like, for a I guess just kind of break down the like average races durations for different categories.
So beginners, your Cat 5s, typically you're probably going to be in the 20 to 30 minute range. Yeah. There's not many crits that are going to be longer than 30 minutes for the novice, for the beginners. When you get into Cat 4, you're looking more in that 40 minute or so range, 30 to 40 minutes. Sometimes they'll combine categories. This weekend at our state crit, there's not going to be combined categories. But when you get into 3s, typically most races are around that 50 to 60 minute mark. When you start getting into the Pro 1-2s, you're looking more at the 60 minute, even up to 90 minutes, sometimes 2 hours. And there's some, like I just got done doing Sunny King, and in the Masters race there, it was the time. So we had a 45-minute race. But in the Pro 1 race that I did later on, it was 60 laps. So they didn't even have time at all on that one. They just said 60 laps. Yeah. So they started counting it down from the start. So that's kind of your average durations that you'll end up seeing, probably within 10 minutes on either side of that for the different categories.
Yep.
Juniors, those tend to be even shorter. You're probably closer to the 20-minute range for your junior categories. And then in some crits for the women's racing, it's the same time as the men's. In other crits, it ends up being where like the Pro 1-2 women will end up doing around that 60-minute mark instead of like a 75 or 90-minute.
Yeah, it's just all over the place. And even some of I've been to crit where the lower categories are pushed up to that 40 and 45-minute mark. Mm-hmm. It's really up to the race organizer.
Yep. And you'll find like there's been races before where it's super hot, and the official will ask. I've had it happen numerous times where the official asks on the start line, like, if who here wants to shorten it. If you do not want to shorten it, speak up. And all it takes is one person to say no, and they stick with the allotted or the specified race time. But if everyone on the start line goes, yeah, let's shorten it because the heat or whatever, usually it's either a weather event, a heat thing, where they would shorten it up.
Yeah, most of the time, if I've been on the start line, they ask. It's usually because it's like 100 plus degrees outside.
Yeah.
And so there's always that one guy.
There's always that one
guy who wants to, that likes the heat.
I drove 6 hours to get here. Yeah. I've been doing 5-hour rides. Can we push it to 2 hours? You're like, nope.
Yeah. So what? Some people listening might have done a road race, might have be doing a lot of group rides, even some Hammerfest type group rides. What are the main differences between a crit and a road race? Just some of the big differences.
Yeah, big one is going to be closed course. So a closed course, and it's a much smaller loop. So typically you end up with at least 4 corners typically. Mm-hmm. Sometimes more. There are some courses that are less, but typically it's going to be a 4-corner or more course. And if you think about it, if you're doing 4 corners in a mile, that's a lot of turning that's happening. Mm-hmm. In road races and group rides, you're probably going multiple miles at a time before ever taking a turn or turning off the road you're on.
Right.
So the more turns there are, the more interruptions in pace there are. Bike handling becomes a more important factor.
Much more technical.
But yeah, it's a much more technical manner of racing. And it ends up being a lot more changing of position tends to happen in a race like this versus, some road races, you'll be traveling along at 16 miles an hour and it's just a log jam of the peloton there. And you can't move up, you can't go back. But typically with crit racing, it's going to be pretty fast from the start.
Yeah.
You end up seeing higher average speeds because it is a shorter overall duration typically.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like what you're talking about with the higher pace and the more corners and technical side of thing, that just makes positioning and stuff like that so much more important. Playing the wind.
Yep.
Because you're traveling at higher speeds, drafting, again, playing the wind and stuff like that becomes extremely important.
If you're someone that gets bored easy, there's some road races where, if it's like in the Pro 1-2s, you can have 100-mile plus road races. That's a long time to be out there.
Yeah.
Even in the, you were talking about the difference or some of the durations for different categories. typically for a Cat 5 or a novice style, and we're kind of gearing this towards beginners, you're looking at 20 to 30 miles. I mean, which is still going to be, typically an hour or a little bit more
in a road race.
Yeah. So if you compare that to a 30-minute race or a 25-minute race, I mean, less time out there means you got to make stuff happen quicker. So, and everyone's like, oh, it's only 30 minutes. Right. How hard could it be, right?
Yep. Yeah, one of the best things about crit racing, we call it like the NASCAR of cycling, but it is so much more spectator friendly.
Oh, for sure.
Than a road race. Road race, like you see them off the start line, and like, okay, I'll see you when you come through here again.
My wife does not like going to road races. But going to crit races, you're seeing the group every minute and a half, every 2 minutes. They're coming by.
Yeah, and a lot of times you can even walk across the course and go to another corner or something like that. I mean, they're usually much more spectator friendly. A lot of them almost like a little bit more festival atmosphere.
Yep.
With people hanging out, and there's probably a beer sponsor and a this, that, and the other.
Food trucks or definitely.
Yeah, so spectator wise, way better.
Tiger Lane this weekend, you can see the riders for all but the part that they're in the stadium. So you see them for probably a minute of the minute and 50 lap or whatever it ends up being. You're seeing them for at least a minute of it.
Yeah,
so
it's like a K,
you're kind of in the action. Yeah, you can watch the action the whole time.
Yeah.
It's 0.7-ish, so just over a K.
Okay. So one of the big things like with crit racing is that, so in a road race, right, if you flat, you have to basically wait on a wheel truck, which may never come. It may go right past you.
There may not be a wheel truck. Yeah.
There may not be a wheel truck.
You may
not have put wheels in the wheel truck.
Exactly. Yep.
But with a crit, as long as you're outside that, whatever it is, last 8K or 8 laps or whatever, once they start counting down laps, you no longer get a free lap.
Yeah, the official will tell you on the start line. They'll say after X number of laps, there will be no more free laps.
Yeah. And so in order for you to get an actual free lap, you have to be in some sort of a mechanical situation where you actually have to unclip and put your foot down and stop.
A flat tire,
a wreck.
If the mechanical is caused by you being negligent and not taking care of your bike, that's not going to count as a free lap. And it's up to the official to decide whether or not it is a free lap.
Most of the time, a free lap is a flat or a wreck.
Yeah, and, exactly.
I will go ahead and say this: if you get caught up in a wreck and you don't actually go down or have to stop and put your foot down, like the official can't, even if you get caught up behind it and you have to put your foot down, they may not let you take a free lap. You unless you're one of the ones that's
that's where you say I was caught up in the wreck, and then I mean by that time, if you're actually caught up behind a wreck, the race is going to likely be going anyway, because as soon as they start hearing a wreck, it's like the natural tendency is to floor it at the front.
Yeah.
I would go take your free lap, see if they'll give it to you. Most times they will, because it's something that was out of your control.
Yeah.
You don't have to show blood on your body. But at the same token, it's all about being fair. So if you weren't actually caught up behind the wreck and you're there trying to get a free lap, that's not cool.
Right.
But what happens then is you get your one lap and you are not allowed to ride backwards on the course. So say the flat happened just past the wheel pit. You don't also have to ride the whole course or get back by following the course. You can get off your bike and walk your bike backwards, or you can walk across the course, but you're not allowed to ride backwards on the course. But then their goal is to reintegrate you what part of the group you were in. So if you were in the breakaway, they're going to put you back into the breakaway. If you were with the main group, they're going to put you back in with the main group.
Yep.
And that's a hard effort to get back up to the group.
Because they don't have this, they're not slowing down for you.
Yeah.
The one thing you did mention that we hadn't talked about yet is the wheel pits. And so basically somewhere close to the start finish, they'll have an area for you to kind of set spare wheels and stuff like that. And so if you do get a flat, you can go back to the pits, change your flat hopefully within a time before the group comes back around on the free lap. Sometimes the official will not start the free lap until you get back to the pits. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're like, you got to get back there and change it before. It really just kind of depends on.
Yeah, if you're planning on changing a tube, like you essentially need to have a wheel.
Yeah, you're not going to change a tube.
Because if you're there trying to change a tube, they're going to start counting laps against you after that one free lap.
Yeah.
So if you got a spare, put your spare in there, take a little note card or something and put it on the wheel so you know which one's yours, and then it's ready in case you need it.
Yep. So wheel pits, free laps. That's the big.
And it being super spectator friendly. This is the most interesting of any of the races to go watch.
Absolutely.
It's the most exciting. You see a bunch of different categories. You get to see all the different racers. It's exciting for the family and friends to show up. I mean, you get so close to the action as a spectator. Like you hear and feel the wind of the riders coming past you. So it's a really fun way to experience cycling.
Yeah, and you can stand right up on the road. You can't get in the road, but you can stand up on the road and watch and stuff like that. So yeah, spectator friendly is, by far one of the best parts about it. So let's get into the things that people really came to hear.
Yep.
Which are kind of our main tips for beginners. Now, if you've been racing bikes for a while, you may not know this stuff, but these are our kind of tips that we feel like we repeat over and over and over and over when it comes to crit strategy. And
as a beginner, these are questions that we would have had on getting into a crit race. So we'll try to kind of walk you through everything and give you as much advantage as possible, especially if you decide you want to jump in this weekend, which we highly encourage.
Yeah, and if you are presently watching on Facebook and you have a question, throw it up there and we'll answer it along the way here.
I'll jump into it. I think
go for it.
I think two big keys here. So the way the races are going to run, you're not going to be able to really warm up on the course unless you're the very first race of the day. Now, there is going to be time in between races where you're allowed to go pre-ride the course. So usually that's 1 to 2 laps, and you're not going to have much more time than that. Usually it's 10 to 15 minutes between races. But we strongly recommend you get a warm-up in. If you know that there's going to be roads that you can ride to warm up on, great. Otherwise, if you have a trainer, I would bring a trainer, set up under a tent if you've got a tent where you can stay a little cooler out of the sun. But you're going to want a warm-up because these races do start fast and they do start hard. So you want to make sure that blood's flowing, the legs are opened up. So get a warm-up and then definitely pre-ride the course. You want to make sure if there is a pothole or where are the cracks in the road, what are the corners like? How much speed can you take? Are they off camber or are they not? And it's going to start giving you a feel for, okay, where do I need to be? What's the wind doing? Which side of the course do I need to be on? How far is it from the final corner to the finish line? Because that's really important if it comes down to a sprint, knowing kind of what position you need to be in the group to have a best chance of doing well in a sprint. So pre-ride the course.
So just break down a really quick warm-up.
Yeah, so what we usually like our athletes to do is, anywhere from like 5 to 15 minutes spinning easy, just getting the heart rate up some, getting the blood flowing. And then we go into what we like to call opener efforts. So anywhere between 30 and 90 seconds where you're spinning a gear up, keeping a higher cadence so you're not smashing your muscular system too much. But your goal is to be kind of at that threshold level, enough to where, even if you don't know what your zones are, enough to where you're like feeling a burn in the legs and you want to hold that burn for a little while. It's not a max effort. And then you take enough recovery time in between, usually at least as much as what the effort was, sometimes twice as much, to just spin easy. Let the legs clear, unload that blood lactate, that burn you could feeling or you could feel, let that clear and repeat it. So if you can get in 4 to 6 efforts like that of some different durations, that's generally going to be good for most people.
Yeah.
Some people need a longer warm-up. So the general rule is the shorter the event, the harder it's going to be, the faster it's going to be, and the longer your warm-up should be.
Yep.
So a short time trial versus a long time trial, you need more of a warm-up.
If you know yourself, if you're riding long enough, you kind of know how much of a warm up you probably need. I will put here in there that one of the biggest mistakes you can make in your warm up is doing all out sprints in your warm up, trying to.
You don't want your peak wattage on the day to be in a warm up.
I can't tell you how many times I've done that. Hit peak wattage for the day in your warm up, and then never be able to repeat it again in the race.
Yep, exactly.
So don't do that.
Don't do
you
that.
can do some light form sprints. We wouldn't call them sprints, accelerations.
Just activation stuff. Yeah.
Just form stuff, but don't go trying to hit peak numbers in your warm up.
All right, so you've done your pre-ride. A tip here: the bigger the field, the closer you need to be to the start line. Like, you don't want to be 8 rows deep or 10 rows deep.
Yep.
If it's going to be a big field and if it's going to be a technical course. So by technical, we mean the more narrow a road is, or the more narrow parts there are in a road, the more technical that is. There's less ability to move up. The more turns there are, the harder it's going to be to move up. Things get strung out a lot more when there's a lot of turns and when there's narrow roads. So Tiger Lane, for those that are listening that are from the area, pretty wide open.
Wide open.
Between corner 3 and 4, it pinches some there, but for the most part, you aren't going to have a wider area than what you get inside the stadium there. No. That's a wide open spot to move up. So
it's smooth.
It's less important, and the smaller the field size, there's just not as much people to get caught behind. So moving up becomes easier.
Yeah.
But I would 100% recommend, if you're doing a bigger race as one of your first races, that you even forego the pre-ride of the course. Hopefully you've known it to get a better position on the start line.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll make your best effort to get close to the front on the start line, and then they'll start calling people up.
Oh, I had that happen before.
And then you end up like 8 rows deep because they called up everyone but you.
Yeah. Once you get to like the Pro 1-2 style level, they'll do call-ups of your more nationally recognized, all the fast people. They're like, hey, let's call up all the fast people.
Yeah.
Ready, go.
Yeah.
That happened to me at MSGP. Mike Olheiser was there, and he was like at the back. I'm like, okay, if he's back here, we're okay. And then they called him up to the front, and it was full gas from the start. And I just did everything I could to like hang on to the back of the group. It was my first ever time doing it. Oh, man.
We'll talk about that, because that's a huge mistake. Yeah. I mean, we might as well go into it, because crit races start hard. And everyone's excited, and everyone has some sort of strategy in their head and stuff like that. And
everyone has one match to burn. Like, if you think about a matchbook, like how many hard efforts you can do, everyone's got one.
Yep.
And there's just people lighting them at the start of a race.
Yep.
So it's not uncommon for us to see power numbers from the people we coach, and the first 10 minutes are the hardest of the entire
race. Yeah.
That probably happens more than like the last 10 minutes being the hardest.
Yeah.
So a lot of energy needs to go into those first 10 minutes. And that doesn't mean you need to be the one at the front driving the pace.
Right.
Don't do that. But also don't get psyched out. If this is your first time doing a crit, know it's going to be hard, and know it's going to slow down some.
Yeah.
So you just got to keep saying, I'm gonna make it through one more lap. I'm gonna make it through one more lap. I'm gonna make it through one more lap. And eventually you'll get to that point where it does calm down. Everyone's like, wow, we can't keep this up for the rest of this race. So you just got to keep telling yourself one more lap.
Yeah. I mean, goes into the next part of positioning. Like we talked about, lining up toward the front on the start, and then trying to hold, a top whatever 10 wheels for the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, you want to go into that first corner as far up in the group as you can.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll even want to be on the front. That's like the only time.
Right.
If it's technical,
to pick the line through the first turn.
Yep. Pick the first turn, and then allow a few folks to come around, and now I know I've got good position. I'm not worried about getting caught up in any of the craziness that could happen behind if people are battling for position in the first corner. Position in a crit is, I would say, probably one of the biggest factors in how well you're going to do.
It's the number one reason people get dropped. You know, you get a bunch of people into the group, and even if they're all of equal fitness, like there are people in that group that are going to get dropped early because they have really bad positioning. And so they're either positioning poorly as far as the wind, which will happen at Tiger Lane. We're going to have wind one direction at least. So you're playing the wrong side of the wind. You're just eating the wind the whole time. So find the draft, find the wind direction, and get on the opposite side. There's a lot of times you can just find a flag and see which way it's blowing. And then use that as your wind direction. And then the other big one with positioning is it goes along with being further up front. But if you're further back, you're closer to people who are struggling and the people who are going to pop and create gaps. And the more gaps you have to fill or bridge or whatever, that's matches every time. You're burning matches. So positioning up front keeps you away from the sketchier riders for the most part. It keeps you away from the people who are going to just blow up anyways and take you off the back with them. And
there's so much more. That bottleneck happens every corner. The more people that are trying to ride through a corner side by side, which is what happens the further back you get, the slower those people are going through the corner. So what you end up seeing is at the very front of the pack, the first person is going through by themselves, and maybe even the first few. And then you start getting where two people are going through side by side. And
probably pedaling through the turn.
And possibly pedaling, and they're going, 23, 25, 27 miles an hour. And the further back you go, the more people are on brakes, slowing down before, and you may be going through a corner at 18 or 20 when the front group, the front people are going 25. So you're having to make up that speed differential after every single corner.
Every turn.
So what you do is you come out of it and you sprint just in time to get back up to the back of the group where it's slowing down again, and then you brake. And then you sprint, and then you brake. And then you sprint, and then you brake. Where at the front, they're just riding smooth through every single corner, not burning matches, recovering after corners. They're doing a few hard pedal strokes, but then they're starting to recover unless you're the person on the very front. There's recovery that happens. When you get in the back, it's sprint, barely recover, get through the corner, sprint. And the whole time in your mind, you're going, oh my gosh, how could the people at the front be that much stronger than me? Like, I'm about ready to pop. I can barely hang on, and somehow someone's up there driving the pace, when really you're doing a lot harder effort.
You're doing this to yourself.
Exactly. So
it's so worth, like, in essence, if you find yourself too far back, it is worth burning a match to get to the front, close to the front, so that you can ride the smoother lines versus having to burn a match every turn, closing gaps, making up that difference when everyone else rolled through and you had to come on the brakes, and basically, like you said, you could easily be slowing down through a turn to 18 miles an hour if it bottlenecks.
Oh, for sure.
And then everyone else is rolling through at 25 plus.
So that race I was just referencing way back when, it was one of my first races is in a 1-2-3 race. So I had just moved up to a 3. And it got to the point where it was a technical course and super fast, always one of the hardest. People get dropped all the time in that one. But it ended up being like my goal was I couldn't really move up anymore. So instead I was focusing on, okay, what corner's the slowest and that we're having to sprint the hardest out of. And so I would just fade off the back so that I could carry speed through it and I wasn't having to do that sprint. So I'd let myself fade off the back on this downhill, and a bunch of people grabbing brakes and then sprinting out of the corner. I got it timed to where I'd come through the corner right onto the back of the group when they were back up to speed, and was able to survive that. Otherwise, I guess this is 2008? I mean, I wouldn't have survived that race if I hadn't figured out how to go smooth through the corner, even though I was no longer at the front.
Yeah, and some of that, that is one of our tips, is really try to focus on taking the corners as smoothly as you can, braking as little as you can. And if you can pedal through it. But like you said, whether it's a positioning thing or your skill or its skill, if you have to brake really hard into a turn and come out of the turn much slower than you went into it, you're going to have no choice but to basically put in a big effort to get back up to speed. So, I mean, if it's pretty much kind of too late now for the weekend, but you got to work on cornering.
Oh yeah,
you've got to work on the technical side of cornering, and
and then know that there's not. The inside may not be the fastest and the outside may not be the fastest, but you got to figure out what's the easy way to go on each corner. Doing Sunny King, the fast downhill left, the inside was not the fast one. You run a little more risk when you're outside because if something happens or someone goes wide, they can take you, into the curb. But I was passing 5-6 people at a time, just taking outside instead of the inside. And it saved a ton of energy. So as soon as I figured that out, same with corner one, like it was the same thing. You needed to be on the outside to carry more speed and not get caught up with that big, massive break and sprint scenario. So, and then just to reiterate what you mentioned, I'm always thinking through if it's a windy day, like, okay, it's tailwind right now.
Yep.
That means this right-hand turn is going to turn into a wind from the right. So I need to make sure when I come out of this corner, I'm on the left side. I'm far left.
Yep.
And then I'm making sure, okay, next corner, we're going to be into the headwind. I'm going to use that headwind to get myself to the right side because when we take that next right, it's now going to be coming from the left and I need to be protected from the wind. So I spend my whole race making sure I'm doing as little work as I can compared to the other people in the race. And it's going to make a massive difference over the course of 20, 30, 60 plus minutes.
Yeah. I mean, that's really the goal, right? Is to make the race as easy as possible, as long as possible until you need it.
Yep. And then it's go time.
Yeah. So one of the really cool things, which is one of the differences in road races as well, is preem laps.
Preems.
And so what happens in a preem is they'll call a preem lap for a specific group. Sometimes they call it for the breakaway. Sometimes they'll call it for the main group, or if it's all together, just be for the main group.
Spelled Primes.
Yeah, primes. Preems. Anyways, so a preem could be anything.
You will never see people sprint so hard as they will for a pair of socks. Like, how'd the race go? Well, I won a pair of socks.
I got dropped. Did not finish, but I got a pair of socks. Yeah, so it'll be all kinds of things. Obviously people go a little bit harder for cash, but cash is pretty common. Preem, and then like
cash,
I said,
water
socks,
bottles, beer sometimes.
Yeah.
You name it.
All kinds of things that people donate. And shoot, half the time at Tiger Lane, all of a sudden you'll have some people show up on the sidelines waving $100 bills, and they just keep calling preem laps.
So run through what a preem lap is. I don't think we've really hit.
So basically, they call a preem lap. You don't necessarily know what the preem is initially, unless there's somebody over the loudspeakers telling you what the preem is for. But it's literally like that's a finish line. It basically turns the lap into a finish line.
Yep.
And so you go through the lap, and whoever crosses first from that group they call the preem for wins the preem. But the race continues on.
Yes, it doesn't stop.
Doesn't stop there. No. Yeah. So, we even talked about this yesterday with our team. One of the best times to like go on a breakaway or try to get off the front by yourself or with a small group is to go with somebody going for a preem and don't actually go for it yourself, and then go over the top of them.
Yep. Yeah, you just keep going because they're sitting up. They were going for that.
Yeah, they were going.
And the pack thinks you're going for that too, typically.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, they're just going for the preem.
Yeah.
I'm conserving my energy back here.
Yeah, they're not going to.
Suddenly
they're going to sit up as soon as this preem is over.
Gap. Yeah, so suddenly you have a 10-second gap that you didn't have to initiate.
Yeah.
You just keep the pressure on afterwards. So, great time.
You let the bozo win socks, and you went over the top. Now have a pretty cheap gap.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll have a gambler's preem, which is where they'll have like a big cash prize, but it's usually like right before one lap to go. So you got to think to yourself, like, do I want to go for the cash?
Yeah.
Or you're not going to have time to recover for the for the win typically, unless you're that much stronger. But they're a fun way to liven things up, and it's again spectator friendly. So it's like a cool thing because you're seeing a lot more action.
The spectators definitely get into it a lot more.
Yep. But this weekend we're gonna have stuff for preems, so it'll be fun.
Yeah, I mean I like I'm a big fan of going for preems, but I rarely get them.
Which is the worst strategy out there.
Yeah.
I waste the effort and don't get the reward.
Exactly. That's my game. I like to blow myself out the back going after 3 pair of socks. And then
that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah. If your plan is to win the race, I highly recommend you don't go for any preems. But you could do the tactic of going over the top.
Yeah.
But going for preems is a big burnt match that is not going to help you at the end.
Yep. So we talked about wind direction a bit. You got to know wind direction and be in the draft side of that. Moving up, we talked about positioning, like knowing where you can move up. Sometimes you can use the wind to move up. Sometimes it's certain parts of the course are much wider, and those are easy to move up.
Yep.
Turns, like coming up while everyone's braking, you can come up and move a bunch of spots into. You don't want to be the jerk who's like clipping people's wheels or diving on people's wheels, but you can...
Or diving the corner.
Yeah, but you can come up and make a lot of spots on a wider section into a turn when everyone's having to brake.
Yeah, when they're braking and the group's naturally moving left, it opens the door.
Yeah.
You just want to make sure you're able to, pass 5-10 people and gradually kind of put yourself into a spot before the turn's actually starting. What you don't want to do is be sprinting up and then dive into that corner and have to hit brakes or hit people, or that's a very unsafe thing for everyone.
Yeah.
But you'll find that you can move up 3, 4, 5 spots. And if you're doing that and there's 4 people across, and you move up 2 spots, that's 8 people you've just gotten ahead.
Right.
Do that a couple times over the course of the loop, and you've put yourself in a good position. But I like to, when I'm in a race, I like to think, okay, where is the best spot to move up? I'm not trying to move up like the entire lap. I'm thinking, okay, I know this is a spot I can get some position back. I know this spot would probably be better to recover and just hold position so that I have the energy the next time through to move up. You just can't count on that at the end of the race to be the same, which we'll go into here in a second. But
yeah, I mean, you got to know where you can move up, and a lot of times those places are also decent places to attack because it is so easy to move up alongside the group and stuff like that. If you are one of those people who is considering, you like being off solo or with a small group, then after 2 or 3 laps of the race, you'll figure out some of the best spots to attack, because it should be some of the hardest sections of the course. Those are usually your best suited places to lay down and attack and try to get off the front if that's what you're going for.
Yep.
So crit racing, there are some inherent risks to crit racing. So let's talk about a couple things that can keep safety high, especially for new people that aren't necessarily probably used to riding super close quarters with people at speed through turns and stuff like that.
That's the absolute biggest thing. You'll probably hear it a lot in the race, especially the more beginner races. You'll hear people yelling, "Hold your line." So essentially, there is the fastest way to get through any one corner, and if you're at the front, you get to take that. You can start wide, you can hit the apex, you can come out wide, you can carry the most speed. That's why it's good to be near the front, not on the front, but near the front. The further back you go, you're going to end up having people beside you, having people in front of you. So now when you're cornering, you don't get to take the apex. What you have to do is you need to make sure you're following the wheel in front of you. So if everyone follows the wheel in front of them, you all take this nice arc through the turn, and everyone stays safe. Where there becomes issues is if you have a person who's in the group that's trying to move off of a line, coming into your line, or diving into you. All of those can be areas where things can get a little more hairy.
Yeah, do your best. If you're not confident in the group and you're not, confident riding close quarters. Big thing is try not to wrap wheels. So like your front wheel should not overlap a back wheel of somebody in the group.
Yeah. There's so much shifting that happens that you really got to protect that front wheel.
Yeah. And guess what? If it's your front wheel, you're the one who's going down. The person you hit their back wheel is probably going to feel it, and they'll be like, oh, what happened? And you're going to be in the ground.
And the other thing with this is the person whose handlebars are in front, they're the ones that essentially are controlling the position and controlling the line. So if you want to have control over where you're at, where you're going, where you're turning, you need to be the person with your handlebars in front. If yours are behind, you're pretty much going to have to react to what the person next to you is doing. So pay attention to that. Going into a corner, I always try to make sure, if I'm moving up, I make sure I get my handlebars, and I like to try to even get my hip in front of the person that's next to me, so I know that I have control of that line. They can't take my line from me. So I know I'm a lot safer there. And then the other thing, which people probably aren't used to doing, is keeping your elbows out. It can be very nerve-wracking, and I'm sure a lot of beginners probably think of a crit or a big group like people are just bouncing off each other all the time. Like if you watch the pros and they do like the above shot, those people are so used to getting hit, to getting bumped. That's generally not what you're going to have in a Cat 5 race. People aren't trying to get as tight and as close as possible. The more experience you get, the closer everyone's going to be. But if you can keep your elbows out when you're in the group, the first point of contact is going to be your elbow, which you can absorb, you can feel, you can lean into. What you don't want is the point of contact to be in your bars. So by using your elbows as like a way to have a first touch point, it's going to be a lot safer for you. You're still going to maintain good control of your bars. You can kind of absorb it as opposed to someone coming into your bars and causing you to lose control. Yeah,
well, that holds really true. Like if it does come down to a bunch sprint, if you are, let's face it, like bunch sprints are sketchy by nature. I'm
at an age now where I fade off the back during those.
I learned that the hard way this year. Going down in a bunch sprint, blowing out my collarbone. So, if it does come down to a bunch sprint, like basically run through everything we just said. Get toward the front. Try to be first couple wheels through the last turn. Play the wind to make sure you're on the right side. Keep your elbows out. If you're not confident, doing a bunch sprint, it's just motor down. Just
attack with 3 to go or attack with 2 to go.
Yeah.
Like if you're not a sprinter or you don't want to risk it, go early. Catch people by surprise.
Yeah.
Like I've seen a lot of successful last lap or last 2 lap flyers happen. Yep. Where no one wants to be the one chasing necessarily because they want to have legs for the sprint.
They're worried about sprint, yeah.
So everyone kind of looks at someone else to try to take up the pace, and you can catch people by surprise. So if you're someone who's not wanting to mix it up in a sprint, go for the break.
Yeah.
Or make it your point during the race. Like first 10 minutes, I'm going to relax. I'm going to try to be as efficient as I can. I'm going to try to conserve as much as I can. But after that, my goal is to be in a breakaway. So I'm going to attack. I'm going to keep attacking. I'm going to hope people go with me. If I'm off by myself, I'm going to ride at an intensity that I know I can sustain. Hopefully someone will bridge up to me. But you can do things to stay safe in a crit, to play towards your strengths. We had a question where someone asked, like, what's the strategy? Like, how do you race a crit? And essentially, I mean, it depends on what your skill set is. The things you don't do are get on the front and think you're going to drop everybody.
Not going to happen.
Because that's not going to happen. Surf the back if it's a technical crit. Because you're going to do sprint and recover. Now, if it's a wide open crit with like not too many people, yeah, you can surf the back all day long. But you risk missing the move if a move happens. But you want to conserve as much as you can. When you start sensing the field's getting tired, if you're feeling good, start testing the field. Anytime it's been hard, that's the best time to attack. As soon as it slows after it's been hard,
You feel that slowdown.
And by hard, you may not know what hard necessarily is, right? So if it's been strung out, if it's been people, lined up, one person on the wheel of the other, you're not the big group anymore, you're not riding 5 across, that means it's been hard. So if you do that for a lap or two and it then slows down and starts bunching, great time to test it and try and attack there as soon as that slowdown happens.
Yeah. There's one thing that we recommend that I've screwed this up, I don't know how many times. Watch the lap count.
Yes, huge.
Like, I don't know how many times.
I guarantee you this weekend it happens where someone's like,
I thought it was 2 to go.
I didn't realize it was the last lap.
Yeah. Because not every, like a lot of crits will have the bell, and they'll ring the bell for preems, and they'll ring the bell for last lap. And like you said, sometimes they do the gambler where they ring the bell for the second to last lap, and then...
And sometimes you have spectators with cowbells that are shaking them for you.
Yeah. So watch the lap cards. The official's going to hold up a lap card every last 8 probably.
Which is right at the start-finish line.
Yeah. And so, 1 to go is the last lap.
If you ride through more and see 1, that's it. Your next time through is the finish.
Yeah, I cannot tell you how many times I've screwed up the lap card and was just delirious and didn't look, and then realized why is it picking up? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, it was the last lap.
Which as soon as they start doing a lap countdown, every lap take a peek.
Yeah.
It's easy to forget which, even over the course of a lap, there's a lot that's happening, which is why crit racing is so fun. But it can be easy. I've had times before where I'm like, I honestly thought we had 3 to go, and suddenly it's last lap, and I'm like, well,
better move up.
Where I thought I was going to move up, on 2 to go, it's now last lap, and everything's faster on the last lap typically. Yep. So the spots you thought you could move up before, those probably go away. The corners maybe you were pedaling through may not be corners you can pedal through anymore. And I've lost a race before. I don't know if I would have ended up winning, but I would have had a pretty good chance until I clipped a pedal in the final corner because I pedaled through it every other lap, but we were going, 4 miles an hour faster or more on this final lap.
Got to lean that bike a little more.
And clipped it almost high-sided. It was so the course changes as the speed increases, and the speed typically increases those last 1 to 2 laps.
Yeah, for sure. The last big thing I would say is, have fun with it. And guess what? If you get dropped, welcome to the club.
Yeah, don't not go try it out because you're afraid you're going to get dropped.
Oh yeah.
You build experience, you'll build comfort, and most people get dropped in their first race, like Sanford. Yeah.
My very first race.
First crit. He won his first road race and then got dropped on his first crit.
Yeah.
So that shows how it's not necessarily a fitness thing. Yeah. It's the position thing. It's the comfort in the pack, the ability to move up, the ability to hold position. All of that is something you have to learn. It's not something you practice on a group ride, really. So how else are you going to get better at it than doing it? So if you're fearing that you're going to get dropped and you'll be embarrassed or whatever, I say join the club.
There's races that like MSGP before it was no longer. That Friday night crit was my nemesis for the first 3 years I did it. And
8 corner crit,
I could not for the life of me stay in that crit, and couldn't figure it out. I just thought my fitness was terrible. I don't belong racing in these races, and then I finally okay, I'm gonna get toward the front, and I'm gonna go, even if I have to be on the front for part of the first few laps. I'm gonna stay in first 10 minutes, and then we'll see what happens. And literally, the next several years that we did it. I've stayed in, felt great, and was actually driving it toward the end of the race because you make it through the first 10 minutes. Yep. It's always hard. And if you can figure out...
people are getting popped, especially in that one, because it's technical. people can't hold the pace or they can't handle the sprints out of each corner if they're further back, and now you're having to not only like deal with those accelerations, but now you're having to close gaps and you're in the wind. You're no longer even on a wheel because someone else opened up a gap.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you got to build confidence. You got to build the skill that is being a good crit racer. So only way to do it is to get out there. And I guarantee you'll be amped up and like jazzed if you do it, regardless of how many laps you hang in there. It's a cool experience going past the spectators, hearing the crowd yelling. Mm-hmm. Like the whole thing is super fun. So get out there and give it a try. And if you get dropped, so what? What happens if you get dropped? Keep riding. Eventually, some races, if it's a smaller field, the officials will keep you in there. You get to keep going. Other races, they'll pull you and they'll just let you know that was it for you. And usually they score you based on, how many laps down you were. But a lot of people get dropped. A lot of people get pulled. So don't. And it doesn't mean you're going to be a bad racer down the road. Just learn from it all and get better.
Yeah, if you see an official like waving at you and you're dropped, they're probably telling you you're pulled or get off. It's just a safety thing, because if you're just hanging out in the middle of the road while the pack's barreling down on you in a final sprint, there's a chance that it's going to time it to where you're in the way, and that's bad. So,
you may be in a corner going slower than what the front group is doing, and then it could be
it's a safety thing for sure.
One last thing, you just talked about MSGP, and this is something that being near the front we already talked about, but make sure you check what gear you're in at the start line. So like if you've been on the trainer and you just did your last spin up and now you're in your 53.12, 53.11, you're like, yes. And then you get to the start line and you go to do that first pedal stroke to get clipped in and you don't go anywhere because you're in too hard of a gear or too easy or whatever. You can end up going from front line to off the back, having to play chase and practice clipping in.
I was gonna jump on that. If you didn't say it, I was gonna jump. Yeah. You could easily be on. You could line up at the front and be on the back foot in no time if you can't clip into your pedals.
Mm-hmm. That was the highest pressure thing. Like once I became a decent crit racer, I was like, MSGP was a big one. Chattanooga was another one. I was like, I got to make sure
nail this clip in.
And if I did, I'm like, it's going to be a good race. And if I didn't, I'm like, this first 15 minutes is going to be horrible.
It's the worst feeling ever when you're like. The thing, like, it all happens in slow motion. You, like, step up on the pedal, and then all of a sudden you see it start to turn over on the backside, and you're like, no! And then you're like, ta-tung, ta-tung, ta-tung.
Doing the single leg pedal.
Trying to get it to flip over, and then it just does the death spin.
Oh, yeah.
And then your heart rate goes through the roof.
Yep.
Yeah. So practice clipping.
We do have a tactic for avoiding the pedal spin, so maybe that's for a different one. But the really hard pedal down just spins the other side. Yeah. So you can do more of a push-off clip-in as opposed to hard pedal clip-in.
The scooter start?
The scooter start, yeah.
All right. I think we covered a lot of the basics.
Yep.
Obviously, we have episodes out there on how to race as a team. If you are racing with a group of people, how not to get dropped. There's a whole podcast on that, which goes into more positioning stuff.
Yep.
So check out those episodes as well if you're really looking to kind of beef up your crit IQ, your racing IQ before you jump into one. So.
Yep, but I strongly encourage you to get out there and give it a try.
Yeah, it's a blast.
It's exciting, yeah. If nothing else, go watch. Go watch one. And
if you go watch one, that'll make you want to get in one for sure.
Yep.
All right. Cool. We appreciate everyone hanging out, listening, watching. We'll catch you guys next time. Adios.
Peace.